Applied Linguistics, Language of Learners, Part 2, Module 3, Unit 2.
I know words. I have the best words.
Good for him. He knows the best words. And to communicate well, we do need the best words, because with words we make word choices. And as we choose, we also make phonological, and we need to make phonological, lexical, grammatical, sociolinguistic, and pragmatic sense. We need to make sense in many ways with the words that we know. My name is Professor Joseph Polshak, and this is Elemental Linguistics. So as I start this talk, I want to talk about pragmatics. Let's look at this conversation. Imagine you're walking through the park, and you come upon a man sitting on a bench, and next to this man there's a dog, a big dog like this pit bull here. And you walk up to the guy and you say, "Hey, does your dog bite?" And the man says, No, he doesn't. My dog doesn't bite." So you reach out to pet the dog, and the dog bites you on the hand, and you say, "Ouch, you told me, you said your dog doesn't bite." And then the man sitting on the bench says, "But that's not my dog." So here we see the contrast between pragmatic and semantic meaning. With semantic meaning, focusing on the meaning of the words. The dog next to the man was not his dog, so semantically, when you said, "Does your dog bite?" he referred to his dog, which does not bite, and he said, "No, my dog doesn't bite." But the speaker meaning was, the speaker assumed in context that the dog sitting there was the man's dog, and so he said, "Does your dog bite?" thinking that this was the man's dog, but the man didn't answer the speaker's meaning, which included a social context. So this is a good example of a pragmatic mistake in a sentence. With pragmatics, we study why. Why did you say what you said? Language teachers often focus on rules, and rules give us choices such as the dog chased the cat, or the cat was chased by the dog. And pragmatics asks, why do you say it that way? Why do you say the things that you say? Why do you say them in a particular way? Why? What is the context? What are you emphasizing? So we need pragmatics to do many things, to manage a conversation. I'm sorry, could you say that more slowly and simply, please? That's managing a conversation. We need pragmatics to make and to understand and to accept and to reject polite requests. Could I borrow from you $100? No way. Could I borrow from you? Would it be okay if I borrowed from you $100? Oh, that might be okay. So there's different ways to manage, accept, and reject a request. We need pragmatics to respond politely to praise or apologies. Good job. No, it wasn't. That was a really good job. Oh, thank you for telling me. Different ways to respond politely to praise or apologies. With pragmatics, we understand pragmatic, semantic, and syntactical nuance, and we also can recognize whether something is a joke or not. We recognize or understand jokes. And this brings up sort of a diversion, a little digression here about joke grammar. So here's a joke. It's probably not that funny, but it is a joke. Hey, don't worry, you're a unique person, just like everybody else. So this joke has a setup and a punch, like all jokes tend to do. A setup creates something that has been called story one. It creates a story in the mind of the listener. But the punch kind of destroys story one with a surprise and creates a second story, which you can call story two. So language learners have trouble understanding whether a joke is a joke or not, and they also have trouble understanding the two stories. They might understand one meaning, but to get the joke, they need to understand two meanings. And so here's a picture of this idea. The setup creates story one. You are unique. And so the listener thinks, story one, oh, I'm a special person. I'm unique. But then the punch comes and says, just like everybody else. This creates story two, which kind of destroys story one and creates a surprise that says, oh no, I'm the same as others. So you have a story one and a story two, a setup and a punch. And language learners oftentimes, English language learners oftentimes can't recognize that it's a joke, and they also can't hear or see, understand the two nuances that are brought up by story one and story two. So that's a little bit about pragmatics. Now let's look at phonology and pronunciation. So language learners need to be able to master the phonological grammar, the sound grammar of a language to be able to communicate. The most important thing is to be able to be understood. You want to have understandable pronunciation. Don't worry about being a native speaker, or don't worry about being like a native speaker. Just be understood is the key. And at a super basic level, teachers can teach voiced and voiceless sounds. For example, p, t, k. What are those? Those are voiceless, and b, d, g. Those are voiced. And one really nice way to help learners see the difference between voiced and voiceless sounds is to have them practice saying them while they hold their hand right here on their throat. So p, t, t, p, t, k. There's no voice, but b, d, g. You can feel the voice vibrating here. And this creates an awareness of how the sounds are made. Another basic technique that we can use to help learners master a little bit of phonology and pronunciation is this distinguishing task. Are these sounds the same or different? So the teacher pronounces s, s, same or different, z, z, same or different, s, z, same or different, and the students answer same or different, z, s, same or different. These are really basic aspects of phonology and pronunciation. I like to focus on rhythm, stress, and intonation, kind of a sing-songy way of practicing, for example, English pronunciation. So this kind of nonsensical sentence, I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here, you can pronounce it with rhythm and stress and intonation. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. Go to the end of it, than I did when I got here. Da 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 da. Repeat after me. Da 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 da. Good. Now say it with me. Than I did when I got here. Snap your fingers with me. Than I did when I got here. More like I do now. More like I do now. Repeat after me. Da 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 da. More like I do now. Dun 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 dun. A little bit extra of rhythm in there, but you get the idea. More like I do now. Repeat. More like I do now. And the whole thing, I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. Good. So you can see you can practice on this rhythm and intonation, which helps language learners get a feel for how English intonation, for example, is pronounced. After pronunciation, we can also talk about the language of learners and what they need to know about vocabulary. Well, for native speakers, how many words do you think an educated native speaker of English knows? Take a guess. Say the guess in your head. The answer is probably about 20,000 words. Did you get the correct answer? All right, what about this word? How many, to really be successful in living in a foreign country, going to university, something like that, how many words do you think English language learners need to know? Get your answer? So the answer is 8,000 to 9,000. And this gives the learner 98% coverage of basically all the language that is used every day. If you know the top 2,000 words, then you probably have coverage of 80 to 85% of languages that's used every day. If you don't know 15%, that's not enough, but not knowing 2% is enough to get by basically in every kind of situation. But the first thing is learn the top words first, and then learn the mid-frequency and low-frequency words after that. So this is a very basic rule of vocabulary that learners need to know when they're learning, for example, the language of English. What about grammar? Well, as we've talked about in some of my other talks, one of the basic points of grammar is that learners tend to learn grammar points in a natural order. This is related to Krashen's input hypothesis. So a learner will learn he's running, he's speaking, before he or she learns he likes, she likes, etc. So these are things that are learned in order. A more complicated issue is how learners learn relative clauses in stages. The basic key point is the easier ones and the more common ones are learned first, and we can study the rules to learn these difficult grammar points, but we need time on task and big data to acquire. If you want to know more about how to teach grammar or learn grammar, you can look at the video in the Applied Teaching Topics course about the hammer of grammar, right? So let's look at some more detail about the sequence of how learners might learn relative clauses in a particular order. So here are some relative clauses. The part of speech is the relative clause with the subject. The alien who was crazy ate George. A relative clause with a direct object. The story that I wrote about aliens was amazing. The next one with indirect object. The alien who Susan gave the brain to was hungry. And object of a preposition. I met the alien that John was talking about. Possessive kind. I know the alien whose father is visiting. And the most difficult one and the rarest one, object of comparison, the alien that ET is bigger than, is scary. What's the key point about these? Generally speaking, English language learners will learn these in this particular order because the most common ones are the easier ones and the more difficult ones are rarer. But the key point also is if you can use, for example, number 5, I know the alien whose father is visiting, you most likely can use numbers 1 through 4. If your first language does not have this type of relative cause pattern, it's probably harder for you, and learners often tend to avoid it if they don't have it in their first language. Okay, so let's sum up. In short, pragmatics goes above grammar. We express meaning in many different ways, besides just with grammar, but grammar, tone of voice, body language, context, etc. For example, tone of voice. How are you today? I'm fine. How did the test go? Perfect! It just went perfect! So you can tell by my tone of voice that I was saying the opposite of what I meant. My body language also showed that as well. That's pragmatics. Phonology. One of the things I like to focus on is rhythm, stress, and intonation. I feel more like I do now than I did when I got here. Remember that with vocabulary, we need to learn the top words first. And with grammar, there are a number of ways to teach and learn it, but key points are time on task. We need big data and learning grammar through meaningful communication. You can study it, but time on task and big data combined with meaningful communication will be the natural way that we can learn another languages, the grammar of another language. I'm having trouble with my grammar today. So that's all I have for today on the language of learners. Thank you for listening.